One of them swims miles of open ocean between islands, dives for salmon, and feeds on whales that wash up dead on the beach. One of them is the rarest wolf on the entire planet. Fewer than 30 are left in the wild, all of them clinging to a single corner of one American state. And one of them is so enormous it can weigh as much as a grown man, with jaws built to snap the leg bone of a full-grown moose. 3 completely different animals. One question: what do they have in common? They're all wolves. Every one of them. Not distant cousins, not kind of like wolves. Wolves living in North America right now, on the same continent you're standing on. Most people think there's only one. The wolf. Gray, snarling, howling at the moon somewhere far away. But North America holds 12 different kinds of wolf. Coastal wolves and Arctic wolves and desert wolves and forest giants, plus one animal so genetically strange that scientists still can't agree what it is. We're going to walk through all 12 from the most familiar to the last survivors hanging on by a thread. And by the end of this video, you'll never look at a wolf the same way again. Before we start naming names, let's clear something up, because people get this wrong constantly. A coyote is not a wolf. They look related, and they are, but a coyote is its own separate species. Smaller, lighter, built to live alongside humans instead of avoiding them. When you hear that chorus of high, yipping howls behind a neighborhood at night, that's almost always coyotes. So for this entire video, coyotes are out. Here's where it gets genuinely tangled though. Almost every wolf you're about to meet belongs to a single species, the gray wolf, but split into regional forms called subspecies. Think of them like shapes carved by geography instead of by breeders. Same animal underneath, but a northern forest giant and a desert wolf look, and live so differently that scientists give them separate names. And then there are the true outliers. Wolves that may not be gray wolves at all, but their own distinct species with their own separate history. Researchers have argued about exactly where to draw these lines for over 100 years, and some of those arguments still aren't settled. That uncertainty isn't a flaw in the story. It is the story, because the closer you look at wolves, the more the neat little boxes start to blur. So let's look closer. We start small and familiar, and we build toward the one that's almost gone. The Great Plains wolf. Start with the one you're actually picturing when you say the word wolf. The Great Plains wolf is the classic North American gray wolf, the animal that once ranged across the entire central United States, shadowing the great bison herds more widespread than almost any large predator on the continent. A big male runs about 100 pounds, roughly the weight of a large German shepherd, but longer in the leg and built to travel forever. It was also the wolf America went to war with. As the bison were slaughtered and the wolves turned to livestock, the response was total poison, traps, and government bounties. A deliberate campaign to erase a predator from a continent. By the 1920s, it had very nearly worked, but a handful survived in the deep northern woods the poison never reached. And today, the Great Plains wolf is the backbone of the recovered population around the western Great Lakes. It's the default wolf. It also came within a whisker of being the extinct one. That near miss is a pattern. Hold on to it, because the next wolf never had to worry about its size. The northwestern wolf. Now we go bigger, much bigger. The northwestern wolf, also called the Mackenzie Valley wolf, is the largest gray wolf in North America and one of the biggest wild canines on Earth. The largest individuals push past 140 pounds. That's a predator that can look a grown man in the eye and outweigh most of them. Put your hand flat on a table and picture a paw print wider than your whole palm pressed into the mud. This is the wolf of the far north, Alaska, the Yukon, the Northwest Territories, down the spine of the Canadian Rockies. And it hunts to match. These are the wolves that pull down moose, elk, and bison, prey that outweighs a single wolf many times over, which is exactly why they hunt as a tightly coordinated pack. When you see footage of wolves running an enormous animal to exhaustion across deep snow, you're very often watching this one. It's raw power at the top end of the wolf spectrum. And yet size isn't what made the next wolf famous. The Northern Rocky Mountain wolf. A little smaller than its northern giant of a cousin, and the star of the most famous comeback in American conservation. This is the wolf of Yellowstone. By the mid-1900s, it had been wiped out of the western United States completely. 0 left. For 70 years, the park had no wolves at all, and the elk multiplied unchecked, stripping the valleys bare. Then in 1995, biologists loaded wolves captured in Canada into crates and released them back into Yellowstone for the first time in decades. What followed became a legend in ecology. The returning wolves reshaped the whole park, changing where the elk dared to graze, letting streamside trees grow back tall enough to shade the rivers, drawing back beaver and songbirds that had drifted away. People even say the rivers themselves changed course as the banks stabilized. Whether every detail of that story holds up perfectly, and scientists do argue about the finer points, the heart of it is real. Pull the top predator out, and the entire landscape slowly drifts. Put it back, and the landscape answers. Today this wolf runs through Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. It is living proof that gone does not always have to mean gone forever. Now travel north until the land runs out and watch the wolves turn white. The Arctic wolf. These next 3 wolves are ghosts, pale animals built for a world of ice, and the first is the purest of them. The Arctic wolf lives at the very top of the planet across the Canadian high Arctic and Greenland in months-long darkness and cold that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. Everything about it is engineered for that. The famous white coat is a double-layered survival suit. The ears are shorter and rounder than other wolves, the muzzle stubbier, the legs a touch shorter, every line trimmed to hold in heat that a frozen world is constantly trying to steal. But here is the detail that truly sets it apart. The Arctic wolf is one of the only wolves alive with almost no fear of humans, for an eerie reason. Many of them have never met one. Their range is so remote, a wolf can live its whole life without seeing a person. So the caution other wolves earned through generations of being hunted was simply never trained into them. Researchers who reach them describe wolves strolling right up to camp, calm, curious, arriving from a world our violence never touched. The Baffin Island wolf. Stay in that white world because within the Arctic wolves hides a smaller, paler form worth its own moment. The Baffin Island wolf lives on Baffin Island and the scatter of Arctic islands around it, some of the most isolated wolf country anywhere on Earth. It's smaller than the mainland Arctic wolf and often even lighter, sometimes almost pure white, a wolf the exact shade of the snow it hunts across. Cut off by miles of frozen sea, feeding on Arctic hares, lemmings, and caribou, these wolves have quietly become their own population on a landscape where a single failed hunt can mean starvation. Almost nobody's heard of them, and that's the point. The wolf story reaches into corners of the map where the only tracks in the snow have never once belonged to a human. The Hudson Bay wolf. One more pale northerner to close out the group. The Hudson Bay wolf roams the tundra and open forest of northern Manitoba and the lands around Hudson Bay, a large, light-colored gray wolf, often creamy or nearly white, that follows the great caribou herds across the north. That's the everyday reality of it. These wolves are travelers, ranging enormous distances to stay locked onto the migrating herds that feed them. An entire life spent chasing a moving target across some of the emptiest land on the continent. 3 white wolves, 3 frozen worlds, and now we leave the ice for the strangest identity crisis in the whole family. The Eastern wolf. Here the neat categories collapse entirely. The eastern wolf lives in southeastern Canada, centered on Ontario's Algonquin Park. It's smaller than a gray wolf, reddish-brown through the flanks, and for over a century, nobody has agreed on what it actually is. A subspecies of gray wolf? Its own separate species? A natural hybrid? Genetic studies keep landing on different answers, and the fight is still live today. And it gets stranger. Where eastern wolves meet coyotes, they interbreed, producing the animal the media loves to call the coy wolf, a blend of wolf and coyote now spreading across the northeastern United States. It's bigger than a coyote, bolder than a wolf around people, and thriving in exactly the human-packed landscapes pure wolves flee. Nobody designed it. Evolution is simply improvising a brand new predator in real time, right at the edge of our cities, which makes the next wolf story feel almost old-fashioned because it's a straightforward survivor. The Great Lakes wolf. Sometimes grouped with the Great Plains wolf, this is the population that lived through America's extermination era when nearly every other wolf in the lower 48 did not. A small number held on in the deep forests of northern Minnesota and on a single island in Lake Superior, and from that thread, the whole thing rebuilt. Today, wolves once again run through Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan in numbers that would have seemed impossible a lifetime ago. Their legal protection has flipped back and forth for years, listed, delisted, relisted, as courts fight over whether the recovery can stand on its own. The wolves just keep doing what wolves do, and that brings us to the coast, and to a wolf that broke every rule you think you know. The coastal sea wolf, because this one walked out of the forest and into the ocean. Along the rain-drenched coast of British Columbia and southeastern Alaska lives a wolf that swims, not to cross a river, but as a way of life, paddling miles of cold, open Pacific between islands. So at home in the water that researchers have tracked single wolves crossing stretches of sea that would exhaust a strong human swimmer. Picture that. A wolf, alone, swimming from one forested island to the next across gray ocean because that's simply where the food is. And its diet is unlike any wolf on Earth. Studies of these coastal wolves find that a huge share of everything they eat comes from the sea. Salmon, hooked straight out of spawning streams, shellfish pried off the rocks, seals hauled from the surf, and the massive protein jackpot of a dead whale washed up on the beach. They're smaller than inland wolves, often a different color, and genetically distinct from the gray wolves living just a short distance inland. Different enough that the people who've shared that coast with them for thousands of years have always spoken of them as something apart. A wolf that swims the open ocean and lives on salmon sounds invented for a fairy tale. It is completely, verifiably real, and it's happening right now on the northwest coast. But not every coastal wolf is thriving. The Alexander Archipelago wolf. On the islands of southeastern Alaska lives a smaller, darker coastal wolf found almost nowhere else, the Alexander Archipelago wolf, a creature bound tightly to the ancient, old-growth rainforest of the Tongass and the Sitka black-tailed deer that live beneath it. And that bond is its problem. As the old-growth forest is logged, the deer decline and the wolves decline with them. On some islands, the population has crashed hard enough that this wolf has been petitioned again and again for endangered species protection. Its future is genuinely uncertain, tied to a fight over the last big stands of rainforest. It's a warning, wrapped in fur. A wolf can be perfectly adapted to a place and still be only as safe as that place is. Now, the final two, the rarest wolves on the continent, and the reason this whole list has been climbing. The Mexican wolf, El Lobo. The Mexican gray wolf is the smallest, rarest, and most southern gray wolf on the continent, the one that once ranged the mountains of the American Southwest and northern Mexico. And by the 1970s, it was essentially gone, hunted, trapped, and poisoned out of the wild. Its entire future narrowed down to a tiny handful of survivors pulled into captivity for one last, desperate breeding program. Every Mexican wolf alive today descends from just 7 founders. 7 animals stood between this wolf and total extinction. Then in 1998, the releases began, and the recovery has been slow at every step. These wolves are still so inbred that biologists now sneak captive-born pups into wild dens each spring, hoping wild mothers will raise them and quietly refresh the bloodline. But the numbers are climbing. As of the most recent count, there are now at least 319 Mexican wolves in the wild, and the population has grown for 10 straight years, inching toward the day it might be downgraded from endangered to merely threatened. From 7 animals in cages to more than 300 running wild. Brought back, quite literally, from the edge of nothing, which would be the ultimate comeback on this list, except one wolf situation is even more extreme. The red wolf. This is number 1, and it earns it because the red wolf isn't a gray wolf at all. It's its own species, found nowhere on Earth but the United States, and it is the most endangered wolf on the entire planet. Reddish brown, sitting in size between a gray wolf and a coyote, it once ranged across the whole southeastern United States. Its collapse is almost hard to believe. This animal has lost more than 99% of its historic range, a greater share of its territory gone than lions, tigers, or snow leopards. By 1980, it was declared extinct in the wild. The species survived only because biologists caught the last few and bred them, then released their descendants into one small pocket of eastern North Carolina, the only place on the planet where wild red wolves still exist. And how many? Right now, only around 20 to 30 known red wolves survive in the wild. Let that land for a second. That's not a population, that's a rounding error. A number small enough to fit in a single room, standing between an entire species and oblivion. Every one of them is tracked, collared, fought over. But hold on to this, in 2026, 4 litters of a red wolf pups were born, several of them out in the wild, on real North Carolina ground, with roughly 300 more being carefully bred in facilities across the country, waiting for their turn to go home. A species that was officially declared extinct in the wild is still producing pups. The rarest wolf on the planet, against every reasonable expectation, is still fighting to exist. So line them all up. The plains wolf that outlasted a war of extermination. The northern giant that can look a man in the eye. The white ghosts of the Arctic that never learned to fear us. The wolf that swims the ocean and eats salmon. And the last survivors, El Lobo and the red wolf, dragged back from the very edge by nothing but human stubbornness. This isn't one animal. It's a whole family of them, spread across a continent, each one cracking the problem of survival in a completely different way. And several of them are only still here because, after nearly erasing them, we changed our minds and fought to bring them back, pound for pound.